One voice speaking truth is a greater force than fleets and armies. Ursula K. Le Guin. Welcome back to the Truth Window, brought to you by Diogenes. This is episode 6 entitled, The Government Ratchet. How do we measure an out-of-control government? We could look at 3 things: spending and debt, the size of the government, and the erosion of freedoms. Let's start with spending and debt. The national debt is the total amount of money owed by the federal government of the United States to Treasury security holders. People buy U.S. Treasury bonds, which means essentially that they loan the federal government money that must be paid back later with interest. I say people, but the vast majority of Treasury bonds are bought by governments and massive corporations. The terms national deficit and national surplus usually refer to the federal government budget state of balance from year to year, not the cumulative amount of debt. Deficit means we spent too much and the debt goes up. A surplus means we could pay some off and the debt goes down. You haven't heard the word surplus much in the last 40 years. We nearly constantly do deficit spending. Thus, our national debt has risen from $3.6 trillion in 1982 to $33.6 trillion today. The debt is currently rising by about $2 trillion per year. No better concrete proof of out-of-control government than our current $33 trillion debt. You've heard the debt is no big deal? Let's take a closer look. To give you some reality, it is nearly impossible to comprehend how much money that is. Consider this. What if today we had a come-to-Jesus moment and we decided to never borrow another penny? And we started paying $50,000 per second on the debt. $50,000 every second of every hour of every day for the next 30 years. No more debt, right? Nope. We still would not pay off the debt. But it gets worse. We are not paying anything on the principal debt. In fact, the debt is increasing by $57,000 every second of every hour of every day. I know that is a bit mind-boggling, but it is true. More proof of our government's absolute abysmal failure. There are many opinions as to what is good or bad government, but in the end, putting aside all ideology, solvency is the sharp edge of a government's success or failure. This is not rocket science. This is basic economics. Spend more than you make? Bad. Spend less than you make? Good. It is simple math, almost mechanical in its operation. Balancing the national budget is impossible, you might think. Easy to think so since we haven't done it for 40 years. But we have actually balanced our budget. Between 1946 and 1979, a 33-year stretch, our national debt only tripled from $270 billion to $800 billion. Adjusting that for inflation, the national debt remained flat for the entire 33 years. The debt went from 95% of our GDP down to only 32% of our GDP. Think about that. We had wars, we had economic ups and downs, assassinations, campus riots, disease outbreaks, the entire civil rights movement, all kinds of upheaval. And we didn't have to raise our national debt much at all. We didn't pay off the debt, but we didn't make it worse either. In the last 40 years, it has been a lights-out disaster. Like I said, national debt in 1982 was $3.6 trillion. Today it's $33.6 trillion and rising fast. The debt is now 124% of the GDP. We are incontestably, indisputably going the wrong way, and have been for generations. The interest alone will soon be more than $1 trillion a year. Interest. But the massive increasing debt and the burden of paying it back isn't the only bad effect.